Hello. So today we will be finishing part 3 of Constitution. So a few cases we will discuss and we'll just look what all things we discuss. So today we will finish this particular part. So if you have any doubts or anything also on part 3, then we can discuss that part as well. So part 3 of the Constitution that talks about fundamental rights. That talks about fundamental rights is derived from the Constitution of United States. So it is a concept that was borrowed from United States, the concept of providing fundamental rights, which should be in the form of guaranteed rights. That means we can for sure enjoy these rights. And in case of violation, we also have the right to approach courts for enforcement. So these were the 6 different categories of rights that we had: equality, freedom, exploitation, religion, educational and cultural rights, and last one, protecting all these rights that are being given. That is Articles 12 to 35 that talks about these rights. So it is Article 12 that defines what is a state and against whom we can enforce these rights. So it would include government, parliament, state legislatures, any local bodies, universities, courts. It includes many other things on which these, against whom we can enforce these rights. And Article 13 was regarding laws that are inconsistent with or in derogation with the fundamental rights. That means any law that is violating the provisions of fundamental rights under Part 3, what will happen to those laws? So it includes both laws that were made before Constitution came and also includes laws that were made after the Constitution came into force. So the 3 important topics that we discussed under Article 13 are judicial review, doctrine of severability, doctrine of eclipse, and also we discussed these 4 different cases relating to this. So the concept of judicial review was borrowed from Marbury versus Madison case, and it is a case of USA. So there, for the first time, the Supreme Court of United States, it recognized that the American courts are having this particular power, that what they can do is that they can strike down laws if they are found to be violative of the provisions of Constitution. And this concept was borrowed to the Constitution of United States, and the first case in India is L. Chandrakumar versus Union of India, where for the first time it was recognized that what we are having this particular power of judicial review. So in this particular case, by making an amendment to the Constitution, the power of judicial review of High Court was taken down regarding certain matters of a tribunal. So what was decided is that if power of judicial review has been given to Supreme Court and High Courts, that power cannot be taken away by any constitutional amendment. That would be considered as unconstitutional. And regarding doctrine of severability, it means like separability from one particular statute, whether we can separate one provision or not. If we can separate one provision, we will consider that provision as unconstitutional and not the entire act, if the entire act is not violating the provisions of Constitution. So the case that we discussed was A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras. In this case, not the entire legislation, but only one section of Preventive Detention Act was considered as unconstitutional, and that was removed. And regarding doctrine of eclipse, it means that whatever part is violating the Constitution, that part would be overshadowed by fundamental rights. If there are any amendments made to the Constitution or fundamental rights, later on that provision may again become effective. But for the time being, it would be overshadowed by the provisions of fundamental rights. So is anyone having any confusion on these cases that we discussed, part or any of the articles, Article 12, 13? Any confusion on these topics or the cases?
No, ma'am.
So you can try to remember these cases, and these are the three main topics that we have under Article 13.
Yes, ma'am.
That we discussed regarding the different types of rights: right to equality, freedom, exploitation, religion, cultural rights, and lastly, constitutional remedies. For Article 21, what all cases we discussed? We discussed the case of Menka Gandhi versus Union of India. So Article 21 is what? It is just one sentence, right? It is a very simple right that is given, but there are multiple case laws that have elaborated this particular provision. So they have what they have done is that they have inserted many other rights also, and said that those rights are also included under Article 21. Even though it is not specifically mentioning all the things, it will include all the provisions. So when we are being given this right to life and personal liberty, it does not mean we have the right to, like mere animal existence. What it means is that we have the right to get certain other freedoms, certain other privileges, and certain other rights also, for us to be able to live our life in a better way. So it is not just animal existence, having basic food, shelter, and clothing, but many other things are also needed. So in Menka Gandhi versus Union of India, what else, like which right was recognized? That is also be included under Article 21. Anyone remembers what right was it that was recognized? Anyone? Menka Gandhi versus Union of India. So it spoke about a right, that right, one particular right would also be included under 21. What was that right? It was right to travel abroad. So that was also recognized as a part of Article 21, or a fundamental right. So what happened in this particular case is that there is an act, Passport Act 1976. This Passport Act is giving a power to the passport authorities, that what they can do is that they can seize someone's passport if their actions, activities, or behavior are felt to be uh, a threat to the interest of sovereignty or integrity of India, security of India, then friendly relation with foreign countries, or in general a threat to general public. So in such cases, passport authorities can seize passport of a person. And Menka Gandhi was given a notice that she needs to submit her passport to the passport authorities. So she asked for the reasons, but passport authorities denied to provide her reasons. So she filed a case in the Supreme Court by way of writ petition, and she said that it is violating her rights given under the Constitution. Passport authorities should inform her regarding the reasons. But what the court said is that that particular provision or that particular act itself is not unconstitutional, but passport authorities should try to disclose the reasons. In case it is not possible for them to disclose the reasons, then also it is fine. But right to travel abroad was for the first time recognized as a part of Article 21. So the court advised the passport authorities that whenever and wherever possible, you should try your best to disclose the reasons. But in case it is not possible also, it would not be unconstitutional act or anything like that. Next is Mohini Jain versus State of Karnataka. It was regarding right to education. Mohini Jain was a medical aspirant, and there was some notification passed by government of Karnataka that allowed private medical colleges to charge a huge amount of fees in the name of tuition fees from the students. So she filed a case in the court saying that it is violating her right to get education, and whether it is a fundamental right or not. So court also said that even under Article 21, right to get education is also included. Next is Husainara Khatun versus Home Secretary State of Bihar. In this case, right to speedy trial was recognized as part of Article 21. So this basically was regarding the like a public interest litigation that was filed by a lawyer. So what she did is that she prepared a basic document mentioning that for these different crimes, these many prisoners are waiting for their trial. So she made a list mentioning some minor offenses and some major offenses also. So after deciding, like while going through that particular document, court felt that there are many people who are still under custody waiting for their trial, but they have already completed the maximum term of punishment for the particular offense for which they are accused. So court asked for release of about 4,000 prisoners from jail based on this particular ground. So under this particular case, the right to speedy trial was recognized for the first time. Next, Olga Tillis is regarding right to livelihood, where the Municipal Corporation of Bombay, they passed an order regarding eviction of slum dwellers and pavement dwellers. So their right to life was like questioned under the court of law. So they said that like in every case, it might not be possible for government to provide rehabilitation or some shelter to those pavement dwellers or slum dwellers. But it was said that if government's actions are reasonable, then what happens is that it is not like unconstitutional, it is not violating rights of the pavement dwellers, slum dwellers, or other persons. So anyone, any confusion on these cases, Article 21? On any case, if you have any confusion, we can like repeat that part. Anyone?
No doubts, madam.
Okay. So now whatever I have written here, right, I have written like all the important things over here. So what you can do is that you can basically read what the case was all about, right? For example, in question, in exam, for example, a question comes regarding elaborate the rights that are provided under Article 21 through various court judgments. So what you can do is that you can mention the basic basic article that it is providing for right to life and personal liberty, but this right may also be taken by procedure established by law. So you can elaborate on that part, and while writing cases, what you can do is that basically you can read this entire document, so you would get an idea, right? What was the main issue, what was held, what was violated, what were the questions and everything. So based on that, you can just write, like maybe 3-4 lines on that particular question, depending on how many marks like for that question is for. So like that, you can explain. For example, if you are writing about different types of rights that were recognized under Article 21 through various court judgments. So what you can do is that after explaining this particular like article basic provision that it contains, you can say that there are multiple case laws that have recognized multiple other rights also to be a part of right to life and personal liberty. Maybe you can give the example that in Maneka Gandhi versus Union of India, the court, like what Supreme Court held is that the provision under Passport Act that allows the passport authorities to seize passport of a person was considered as constitutional only. But the passport authorities were given an advice that they should try to disclose the reasons. And in this particular case, right to travel abroad was for the first time recognized as a part of Article 21. So like that, you can explain what was the main issue and what it was. Similarly, you can mention that right to education was recognized in the case of Mohini Jain versus State of Karnataka. What happened in this particular case is that it was recognized that right to get education is also a part of Article 21 of the Constitution of India. Similarly, Hussain Ara Khatun, you can mention that regarding speedy trial. Olga Tillis regarding livelihood, and after that you can mention that apart from this, there are many other situations where court, like directly or indirectly, it recognized that right to fresh air, right to pollution-free environment, all those other rights also were been recognized as a part of Article 21. So even though we see like only one sentence is there in Article 21, In fact, it includes a lot of other provisions as well. So you can elaborate like that whatever cases you know on that particular article, so you can mention those things also. And Article 21A is regarding right to education, and it was originally not there in the Constitution. It was 86th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2002 that inserted this as a fundamental right, and also it inserted a fundamental duty under Article 51A clause K, that parents or guardians will be having a duty to send their child to schools who are under the age of 6 to 14 years. And after that, we also had a legislation, Right of Children to Free and Compulsory Education Act 2009. Then regarding arrest and detention also, we have many provisions, right? Regarding arrest and detention, what all things we have? That grounds of such arrest is to be informed. The person should have right to consult a lawyer of his choice, right to be defended. Then arrest and detention. After arrest and detention, within 24 hours, the person should be presented before the nearest magistrate. Then regarding preventive detention also, there are certain like restrictions mentioned that it should be for a certain duration of time, 3 months only. After that, a permission has to be taken from the advisory board and like that. So we did not discuss this particular case that day, so we will discuss this today. Under Article 22, what happens is that it is talking about protection against arrest and detention in certain cases. So if a person has been arrested or detained, what all rights that person will have. So it recognizes few rights that the person will be having. But even after that, what happens? There were multiple cases where maybe the person who was arrested, he do not even know what all rights he is having. He is not able to claim those rights. And the person who is arrested, that person will also not disclose about those rights or provide any of those rights. So what happens in such cases is that even after we are being given this particular right under Constitution and these provisions are mentioned, rights of persons who are been arrested or detained were like violated for a very long time. So this is the famous case regarding this that you should remember. It is D.K. Vasu versus State of West Bengal. It is the case of 1996. So what happened in this particular case is that this case actually went on for a very long time. So it was actually filed in 1986 only. So what happened in this particular case on 26th of August 1986. So D.K. Basu filed this particular case. Now, who was D.K. Basu? He was basically the executive chairman of Legal Aid Services. So it was basically an organization in West Bengal, and he was the executive chairman of that particular organization. So what he did is that he wrote a letter to the Chief Justice of India, and he also referred to a news published in Telegraph newspaper. So he mentioned that in this particular news, it was mentioned regarding deaths of inmates in police lockup and custody. So he referred to that particular news and also wrote a letter to the Chief Justice of India addressing that particular issue. And what he requested is that that particular letter should be considered like a public interest litigation, and a decision should be made on that particular issue, because a lot of people were suffering because of violation of their rights during their like custody in any police, under any police. So what happened is that the Chief Justice of India, he realized the importance of that matter, and he actually considered it like a public interest litigation. And what it did is that it sent notices to the other, like defendants, the state bodies. It also asked for suggestions from the Law Commission of India as to like what can be done in order to stop or prevent such issues. So this part is clear, right? It was basically in the form of a letter that was written by D.K. Basu who is the executive chairman of an organization called Legal Aid Services of West Bengal. So he addressed this particular letter to the Chief Justice of India in order to draw his attention, and also said that his letter should be considered like a public interest litigation, because a lot of people are suffering because of this, right? That their rights are being violated while they are under custody. And also the Chief Justice of India considered it like a writ petition, and then what happened is that they also asked for suggestions from the Law Commission of India, and ultimately what happened is that it was regarding custodial torture and death by the police. So what happened is that court issued 11 guidelines. So it said that whatever under constitution, whatever provisions we have, that though will anyways be followed. If we are having any statutory safeguards or guidelines for the police stations to be followed, or the jails that should follow, those things would be followed. But apart from that, what happens is that there will be certain other guidelines, like this 11 guidelines were given by court and said that these guidelines should be followed. So what are these guidelines? Background is clear, right? Any confusion on this part? So in this case, what happened is that a letter was written by D.K. Basu, who is the executive chairman of Legal Aid Services, addressing the matter regarding violation of rights of inmates while they are under police custody. And the Chief Justice of India considered that particular letter as a writ petition. And then what the public interest litigation, and what it did is that it took a decision on the matter. Even suggestions were asked from Law Commission of India, and finally the court issued 11 guidelines that were to be followed. Apart from any constitutional or statutory measures, safeguards or guidelines that we might be having, those also should be followed. And apart from that, these 11 guidelines should be followed. So what are these 11 guidelines? Firstly, it says that whoever is handling any interrogation, what happens is that that particular person should there should be an identification of name tags and his designation. So it cannot be like one person is coming without wearing uniform or anything and he starts with interrogation process. So it cannot be like that. He should be in proper uniform, his name tag should be visible, his designation should also be properly visible, and other particulars of the person who is handling of the arrestee must be recorded in a register. So it cannot be like a very casual process where one person just comes and starts with the interrogation, but it has to be properly recorded in a register. Whoever is doing the interrogation, his name and designation should also be properly visible in the tags. Secondly, what it says is that the police officer who is arresting the person or who is doing the formalities, he should prepare a memo of arrest. What is this memo of arrest? It should mention the time of arrest in that particular thing, and also it should be attested by at least 2 witnesses. So that 2 witnesses may either be members of the family or any respectable person of that particular locality. So if a person has been arrested from his home, maybe someone from the family can attest that particular memo. If not from some other locality, any respectable person of that particular locality may attest that particular memo. So what happened is that whoever is doing the formalities regarding arrest, that person should maintain a memo of arrest, and what it would be is that it should be attested by at least 2 persons and be countersigned by the arrestee, and shall also mention the time and date of arrest. So it should be attested by at least 2 witnesses and countersigned by the arrestee. And what happens is that it should clearly mention the date and time when the person has been arrested. So why mentioning date and time is so important is because, for example, under Constitution, we are being given this right that after arrest, within 24 hours, the person should be presented before the nearest magistrate. So if date and time itself is not recorded in any particular like official document, what happens is that police officers might later on say that no, the person was not arrested at 7 o'clock, he was arrested at 12 at night. So what happens is that there might be some sort of, like manipulation with those things. So this should be mentioned in the memo that should be maintained by the person or the police. And also what happens when a person has been arrested, he should be entitled to have one friend or relative or other person known to him or having interest in his welfare being informed. So that means after the person has been arrested, that person will have a right that he can inform at least one of his family members, relatives, or anyone he wants to inform, right? So that that person can also take some, like measures or inform other people and do the needful. So it should be done accordingly. So sometimes what happens, maybe that particular memo may be attested by a friend or family. So in that case, obviously the person would know. So if not, then what happens is that it is like a right that the person will have. He should be given that particular right by the police officer. Next is place of arrest and venue of the custody of the arrestee must be notified by the police to the person. So in case to whom the person is informing, right? Maybe it's a friend who stays in some different district or in some different locality who is not having knowledge about that particular police station. So in that case, what happens is that police officers must properly tell about the place where the person has been kept, right? The venue of custody and all, it should be informed by to the other person by the police officers. And also police officers must disclose that you are having a right that you can inform at least one person regarding this particular arrest. So this right also police officers only must tell, because sometimes the person who has been arrested, he might not be knowing that he has this right. So it is duty of police officers that they should inform the person. And also there should be an entry made in the case diary. So in the case diary, there should be an entry that must be made regarding the at the place of detention regarding arrest of the person, which shall also disclose name of the next friend who has been informed of the arrestee. So in the case diary, what happens is that whomever the other person informed, right, that person's details also should be inserted, that okay, fine, to someone he has at least disclosed the fact. And also the person should be examined by a like a doctor, and regarding any major or minor injuries, it should be like mentioned, and it should be recorded by the police officer. And inspection memo should be signed by both the arrestee and the police officer effecting the arrest, and its copy must be provided to the arrestee also. So it cannot be like the police officer writes regarding some minor injuries and then later on they would like cause some major injuries and then mention that in the inspection memo. So for that, what happens is that the arrestee should also be provided with a copy of the inspection memo that would be like maintained by the police. And also medical examination by a trained doctor must be after every 48 hours during the entire time of detention. And all the documents should be sent to the magistrate for their record. And the person, the arrested person, he will have the right to consult a lawyer and meet the lawyer during interrogation process. And also it mentions regarding the provision for police rooms that we see, that we mostly see, right? So it also mentions regarding establishment of police rooms, and also it says that information regarding arrest and the place of custody of the arrestee shall be communicated to the officer causing the arrest. So those things also should be informed. So these were the like 11 guidelines that were given in DK Basu versus West Bengal, state of West Bengal case. So why this case is important? Because this is a very like landmark case where all these 11 guidelines were given. Before that, what happened is that many of the rights were being violated. People were not even knowing what all rights they are having under constitution or under any statutes that we had. So this particular case, what it says is that it is duty of the police officers itself to inform the arrested person regarding the rights that the person is having. So this is like a very important case that you should remember. So is the case clear? If you have any confusion on any points, let me know.
It's clear, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, it's clear.
Okay. So you don't need to remember like each and every guideline, like how it is mentioned, but you just remember the basic things, that when a person is arrested, it should be recorded where, when he has been arrested, he should be given a right to like inform a family member, friend or someone, a well-wisher. Then what right he will have is that he can consult a lawyer, be represented by a lawyer. His information should be given to the magistrate. He should be examined up within like 40, after every 48 hours. All the injuries and everything should be registered properly, maintained properly, and a copy of that also should be given to the arrestee. So all these were the guidelines. So basic points, if you remember, like that also you can frame that these were the, you know, like rights that were recognized under this particular case. And also you can mention that under constitution what we are having is that uh, it is article 22 that is providing for this particular right, but obviously like under constitution it is not like very elaborate thing. So it is basically with the help of case laws that a certain provision has been, you know, like elaborated or interpreted properly by the courts. So these guidelines you can just go through. Next is regarding exploitation, articles 23 and 24 that we discussed in last class, regarding forced labor, any form of forced labor like bonded labor, immoral traffic prevention act. So what happens, most of the acts would not have retrospective effect, but it is bonded labor abolition act that is having retrospective effect. So that means a person cannot say that I am practicing bonded labor system before 1976 itself. So the person cannot say like that and continue with the practice. This act says after 1976, this practice should be completely abolished. Anyone practicing it would be will have to face the consequences. So even if a person is unable to pay back the loans or anything, this practice cannot continue after this particular period, no matter whether the person was already working as a bonded labor or what the case is. And article 24 is regarding prohibition of employment in factories. Then we also spoke about right to religion. Now for right to religion, we have articles 25 to 28. So a person is given the right to freely profess, propagate, practice any religion of his choice. Now for this, we will discuss a few cases, okay? Right to religion. So there are, I think, 3 cases, yeah. So there are 4 cases that we will discuss regarding articles 25. So article 25 is providing for right to practice, profess and propagate any religion of our choice. And Article 26 is providing us the freedom to manage religious affairs. So just providing the religious right is not enough, right? There would be certain festivals, there might be certain religious activities that we want to, that we want to conduct. So what happens is that this particular article, Article 27 is providing for that freedom, that subject to public order, morality and health, we are having these rights to establish and maintain an institution, manage our own affairs, own and acquire movable and immovable property, or administer such property. So these are the rights given to us, under which we see various trusts been established, they would establish certain temples, certain other community halls, certain schools, and all of those things. And what they will do is that in name of that, they would even hold property. The temple would be their own property, schools would be their own property, they would be having even immovable properties, movable properties also, and they will also look into administration of those properties and matters and all of that. 27 is regarding freedom as to payment of taxes for promotion of any particular religion. So no person should be compelled to pay taxes in any form for promotion of any specific religion. And Article 28 is freedom as to attendance at religious instruction or religious worship in certain educational institution. So this is talking about what all, like whether religious instructions can be provided or not in educational institutions. So these are the 4 different rights that we have under right to religion, Article 25, 26, 27, and 20. Yeah, so now the cases part. So the first case that we have is Muhammad Hanif Qureshi versus State of Bihar. So this is a case relating to freedom of religion that is guaranteed under the Constitution of India. Now what happened basically in this case is that the petitioners were basically members of Muslim community, and they were mainly engaged in the business of butcher's trade. So what they were doing is that basically they were involved in slaughtering of cattle. Now there were many laws that were passed by like state governments, right? For example, if you see the state of Bihar also, then Bombay also, Maharashtra also, what happens is that they were passing certain laws, state laws that were putting a ban on slaughtering of cattle. So what happened is that this particular members of this particular community, they felt that it is affecting our right to religion and also right to what is Article 19(1)(g). Anyone remembers Article 19(1)(g)? What right is it? What freedom?
Sorry, ma'am, can you repeat which article?
Article 19(1)(g).
Ma'am, right to free profession trade, carry to free profession trade and all.
Yeah, so what they said is that it is affecting our right to religion also, and also it is affecting our business, because this is like a business that the petitioners were involved, right? So they said that these bans that the state governments are imposing, these legislations are violating our right to free, trade. So what happens is that this right is like a fundamental right that is guaranteed to us under the Constitution, and the state laws are violating these rights. So what it is that it is unconstitutional. So they filed a case, and what court said is that court held that these restrictions on slaughter of cattle did not infringe the right of the petitioners regarding their practice to religion under Article 15. Why? Because they were saying that it is affecting their right to religion that is guaranteed under Article 25. But they said that this is not like an essential practice that you should compulsorily follow for any Eid. What they said is that this can be avoided also. So they said that even though the state government is passing laws in Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, making slaughtering of cattle a punishable offense, that is not affecting your rights. You can still enjoy your religious festivals, because slaughtering of cows is not like a basic or like compulsory part that you should follow in order to celebrate those Eids and all other festivals. So it was said that it is not an obligatory or essential part of the Islamic religion as opposed to being optional. So it is basically an optional thing that you are following, and it is not like an obligatory and essential part. So your right under Article 25 is not been affected. But they were also saying about Article 19(1)(z), right? Regarding right to practice any particular profession, trade, or business. So the court, what it said is that there are certain, other clauses also mentioned under Article 19, like Article 19 Clause C, which permits laws to restrict right if the measures are determined by the court as reasonable and in interest of general public. Now, why is it in interest of general public that slaughtering of kettles was prevented? Is because those kettles are, what happens is that they are needed for other agricultural purposes also and other economic activities also. So it was considered that because it is not like an essential part of Islamic religion, it is not affecting your right under Article 25. And even though we are being given this right to practice any profession, trade, business, etc., government is having the power to put restrictions on certain businesses. Government is having power to monopolize in a business also. So it is even not violating Article 19(1)(g) because government has that particular power that it can put certain reasonable restrictions in interest of general public. And also it was said that under Article 48 DPSPs also, the government is having a directive that what it should do is that it should protect animal husbandry, right? So government is also having a responsibility to protect and preserve any animals or anything that is having some, like economic purpose or other agricultural utility. So it was said that this particular like state laws that were uh, like introduced in states of Bihar, UP, Madhya Pradesh, etc., banning slaughtering of cows are not violating any of your fundamental rights under the constitution because it is not an essential part of any religious activity. It is just an optional thing that you can even avoid in the interest of general public. So basically it was held that these laws that were passed or introduced by the state government were not violating the rights that are given under the constitution, the fundamental rights that are given under constitution. Is this case clear?
Yes, ma'am.
So what happened is that in this particular case, it was said that people are being given this right to religion, but that particular right is also not absolute right. But in any ways, these laws are not violating your rights, any of the rights given under Part 3. Okay, the next case is Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala. So this case is also considered as the national anthem case. So you can also remember it as the national anthem case. It was Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala. So what happened basically in this case is that in a school of Kerala, 3 children were expelled from their school. Why? Because they refused to sing the national anthem. They refused to sing the national anthem Jana Gana Mana. And these 3 children were expelled from a school in Kerala. So after that, what happened is that they just refused to sing the national anthem. They were not like disturbing anyone else from singing it or did not disrespecting the national anthem or anything. What they did is that they basically silently stood during the morning assembly of the school. So that means they simply refused to sing, but they silently stood there during the assembly time. Why they were refusing is because they considered that it was against their religious faith. It was against their religious faith. So what they did is that rather than singing, they just stood silently during the morning assembly prayer. So after what happens when they were expelled from their school, the father, he filed a writ petition in the High Court of Kerala for enforcement of the fundamental rights of his children under the constitution. So he approached the High Court of Kerala, but what High Court said is that saying that because they were expelled from the school, it is like violating their right to freedom of expression and freedom of religion. But what and it is affecting Article 19 and 25 of the constitution. But what High Court of Kerala said is that no words or thoughts in the national anthem were capable of offending any religious conviction. So basically, High Court was of the opinion that like singing the national anthem would in no way, prevent you from practicing your religion or will go against your religion. So basically, this is what the High Court said. And after that, like because the father was not satisfied with the High Court's judgment, he approached the Supreme Court. And the main question was whether like expelling these 3 children from their school because they refused to sing the national anthem was like unconstitutional or not, and whether it was violating freedom of expression and freedom of religion or not. So what was held is that under the court discussed Article 2. So it was said that the court also discussed, like apart from the constitution, the court also looked into this legislation, Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act 1971. And what the court found out that under section 2, it is saying whoever intentionally prevents the singing of national anthem or causes disturbance to any assembly engaged in such singing shall be punishable. That means only when someone is intentionally preventing the singing, right? So what it is saying is that intentionally preventing the singing or causes disturbance to any assembly engaged in singing shall be punishable. But if someone is silently standing there during the morning assembly, they are not singing, right? That is not, in no way it is like affecting others, right? It is not like preventing others, or it is not even causing any sort of disturbance to others. So what court felt is that it is not an offense under this particular provision. That means they are not dishonoring or they are not insulting the national anthem under the provisions of prevention of insults to national honor act. And if a person is feeling that like singing the national anthem will go against their religious faith, then it is fine. Why? Because they are just simply standing there during the morning assembly. So they are not violating rights of anyone else also or anything like that. So what court held is that the decision that national anthem would be there as a part of morning assembly was basically a decision of Kerala's Department of Education. So it was basically an executive decision that was taken. So it was held that the students are having this particular right. If they want, they can refuse to sing the national anthem. And because they are not violating anyone's right, they are not affecting anyone, they are not disturbing anyone, they are not like liable under that particular legislation. So basically, Supreme Court ordered that those students should be readmitted to the school and they cannot be forced to sing the national anthem. They can simply silently stand there during the morning assembly prayer. So it was recognized that under Article 25, we are having this particular right, and under Article 19 also. So that particular decision of the school was considered as invalid. So is this case clear? Bijoy Emmanuel versus State of Kerala. This is also known as the national anthem case. What happened in this case basically is that 3 students were expelled from a school in Kerala because they refused to sing the national anthem. But what they did rather is that they silently stood during the morning assembly of the school. They felt that singing the national anthem would be going against their religious faith. Then the father of the children, what he did is that he approached the High Court of Kerala by way of a writ petition. But High Court of Kerala said that in the national anthem, we are not having any such words or thoughts that would offend any religious, religious faith or any other things like that. Being unsatisfied with that particular decision, he moved to the Supreme Court. And in Supreme Court, what the court said is that we are having a legislation called Prevention of Insults to National Honor Act of 1971. But under that act, to be punishable, what we need to do, we should intentionally prevent the singing or cause disturbance in to any assembly that is trying to sing the national anthem. So the students have not done any of these things. So it was said that the decision of the school to expel those 3 children was not a valid decision. So the Supreme Court ordered them to readmit the students. Is this case clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Others, is it clear?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. So you can remember these cases relating to right to religion. First is Muhammad Hanif Qureshi that challenged the state-made laws regarding banning of slaughtering of cattle, and next is Bijoy Emmanuel case or the national anthem case, where it was questioned whether standing silently during the assembly prayer, whether it is insulting the national anthem or not. Next is Ramji Lal Modi versus State of UP. Now this also is relating to right to religion only. What happened in this case is that this was basically a petition that was challenging the constitutional validity. Like it was basically challenging the validity of section 295A of the Indian Penal Code. Section 295A of the Indian Penal Code. One second, I'll just get the wording. So it was basically challenging whether section 295A is going against the constitution or not. 295A is basically the malicious intention outraging the religious feelings of any class or any group of people. So what is section 295A? It is basically deliberate or malicious intention of outraging religious feelings of any people or any particular religion. Okay. So in this case, the constitutional validity of this particular article was challenged. Now what this case was all about is that the petitioner in this particular case, Ramji Lal Modi, he was what? He was the editor, printer and publisher of a monthly magazine. He was editor, printer and publisher of a monthly magazine called Go Rakshak. So this magazine was basically focusing on protection of cows. And he was the editor, printer and publisher of this particular monthly magazine. So what he did is that he published an article and that particular article was considered as intentionally outraging to Muslims and thus violating section 295A of the Indian Penal Code. So an article was published in Gorakshak magazine, which was a monthly magazine, and Ramji Lal Modi was the editor, printer and publisher of that particular magazine. So that particular article was considered to be an offense under section 295A of the Indian Penal Code. And it was said that by writing that particular article, he is intentionally trying to outrage the outraging Muslims. So a case was filed wherein he was found guilty for the violating this particular section. So basically what happened is that the people belonging to Muslim religion, they filed a case against this person and he was found guilty. So then he again went for appeal, challenging the validity of that particular court's decision. So what happened? Lower court found him guilty under section 295 of Indian Penal Code. And for that, he appealed to the Supreme Court challenging the constitutional validity of section 295A itself. So what he said is that 295A is not valid. Why? Because a person is having right to, freedom of expression, right? Freedom of speech and expression. So he said that section 295A is affecting that right of mine. I am been given this particular right, and what it is doing is that it is affecting this particular right. So 295A, section 295A itself is not like constitutional, it is affecting my right, and it is not valid. So what happened after that is that so what the main argument of the petitioner was that any law that is restricting freedom of speech under Article 19 Clause 2 of the Constitution in interest of public order would be valid only if the speech was likely to create public disorder. So what he basically argued is that fine, my right to freedom of speech and expression may be restricted on the ground of interest of public order. But when this ground would be valid, when that particular article is leading to some sort of public disorder. But my article has not led to any sort of public disorder, so the decision given by lower court is not valid. But what Supreme Court said is that Supreme Court upheld the decision of lower court and accepted section 295A of the Indian Penal Code to be constitutional. So Supreme Court referred to Articles 25 and 26 of the Constitution and said that the people belonging to Muslim religion, they are been given the right to freedom of religion, and your article is affecting that particular right and is also a violation of section 295A of the Indian Penal Code. So basically the decision of the lower court was upheld and the person had to face the consequences. Is this case clear? Ramji Lal Modi versus State of UP. So what happened in this case?
Yes,
Ramji Lal Modi was the editor, printer and publisher of a monthly magazine called Go Rakshak that was basically on cow protection. He wrote an article that was considered to be intentionally outraging to Muslims and is a violation of section 295A of the Indian Penal Code. So the lower court found him guilty of violating section 295A, and what happened is that it was considered to be maliciously insulting of a religion. He challenged that particular decision and went to the Supreme Court of India saying that it is not causing any sort of public disorder or anything, the article that I have written. So it is, like that particular decision of lower court is not valid. But Supreme Court said that you are committing an offense under section 295A of Indian Penal Code, and also you are affecting the rights that are given under articles 25 and 26 to Muslims. So the decision of lower court was upheld in this particular case. So it was, you can remember this case, Ramji Lal Modi versus State of UP. Next, one more case that we have is SR Bomai versus Union of India. Again, this case is basically relating to emergency, like President's rule, but still it also discusses about secularism also. So what happened in this particular case is that SR Bomai, he was the Chief Minister of Janata. So basically what happened is that he was the Chief Minister in Karnataka state and he was removed from power and presidential rule was applied on the suggestion given by governor. But what happened is that that particular thing was challenged by him in the High Court. He was not satisfied with High Court's decision, then he moved to Supreme Court also in order to fight for this particular thing. So Supreme Court, what it said is that it basically put restrictions on the freedom to, put presidential rules. So it said that it should be only on proper grounds, proper reasons on only. It cannot be like Article 356 is used whenever and wherever it is felt needed. So while discussing about president's rule, the concept of secularism was also discussed under this case, and it was said that secularism is like a basic feature of the Constitution of India. And when we are saying that Constitution of India is like secular, or the India is secular, what happens is that we are also expecting the same from the all the leaders, political parties and everything. So when we are saying India is secular, it means the Constitution also should show secular characteristics, and also the political leaders, political parties should also reflect the same through their actions. So you can also refer this case SR Bommai versus Union of India, but this case basically would be more applicable for president's rule. So any doubts on these 4 cases?
No, ma'am.
So you can go through these cases. It like I have mentioned all the details, but you can just go through and then try to remember the main points. What happened? What was it that was challenged in this particular case, and what was the decision given? So these were the 4 cases
No, ma'am.
relating to relation. Next right that we had is cultural and educational rights, articles 29 and 30. And the next one is constitutional remedies. So we discussed about the different types of writs also. So how many types of writs are we having under Article 32?
Right subject.
What are the different writs?
Ma'am, writs of habeas corpus,
Yeah,
mandamus,
yeah,
Circular.
certiorari,
yeah,
You warrant.
yeah.
quo
Prohibition
warranto.
and yeah, quo warranto. So the writ of habeas corpus means to have the body. If a person is arrested or like detained, then this particular writ has been used in order to know the reasons for such arrest, and court may also order for release of the person. Mandamus is like in the form of a command that may be put to executive bodies if they are not following, not performing any constitutional, any given duty, right? Any public duty, if they are not following, this particular writ may be used. For example, if I want to get certain information regarding PM CARES fund, that particular information should be given to me under RTI. That is not given to me. So I can use the writ of mandamus. If I have applied for a passport, passport is not issued to me, even though my documents and everything was proper. I can use the writ of mandamus against the passport authorities. Same will go if I want to apply for driving license in any RTO. RTO is not issuing the driving license, even though all the documents and everything is valid. Then also this particular writ may be used. Then we discussed about prohibition to prevent or stop a body or the lower courts, and certiorari to certify or to be informed to quash the order. So this would be applicable when the case is still going on. This would be applicable when order has already come. So what the higher courts would do is that they would ask the lower courts to stop or prevent them from passing an order. Here, whatever order has been passed, that would be considered as invalid. That would be basically quashed. Next is quo warranto, by what authority. So we can use this particular writ to ask by what authority you are holding a certain public office or passing a certain order or notification, etc. Then also we discussed that there are certain fundamental rights which are available to all the citizens, and certain fundamental rights that are applicable even to non-citizens. That means even foreigners can enjoy those rights. So examples would be what all rights are like exclusively available for citizens are like 15, 16, 19, 29, 30, etc. And to both are 14, 21, etc. And regarding Article 32, what happens is that to whom Article 32 is applicable? Right to constitutional remedy.
Supreme Court.
Supreme Court will enforce it, but to whom is it available? So it is both citizens as well as non-citizens. So if a person wants to enforce a right that is given to citizens, it would be only citizens. If a right is given even to foreigners, then foreigners can also enjoy the right that is given under Article 32 and then enforce the right that has been given to them. Now there are some questions that we will do. First is, which of the following right is a constitutional right and not a fundamental right?
Right to property.
Yes, right to property is a constitutional right. Under which article?
300A.
300A. Next one. Or read by court to do. What is it?
Anonymous.
Or read by court to some person. Which writ is it?
Option C, ma'am.
Yeah, it is option C, mandamus. Next one. Right to constitutional remedies available in remedies in India is available to. So right to constitutional remedy means it is Article 32. So to whom Article 32 is applicable? Just now we discussed, right? It would be any person enforcing any rights conferred on them. That means it may be citizens also, it may be non-citizens also. Whoever wants to enforce a right that is given to them, that person can enjoy this particular right. But that right should be given to that particular person also. It cannot be like he's just using it. Next one. In which of the articles minorities have the right to establish and administer educational institution of their choice?
Option C.
Article 30 clause 1. Yes. Next one.
Fundamental.
Yeah, it is fundamental rights. Next.
Prohibited.
Yeah, trafficking in human beings is prohibited. Which article is it?
22.
Is it 22?
It's 23.
Yeah, it is 23. What is 22? What is Article 22? So it is regarding
Protection against arrest.
yeah, arrest and detention. So for that we discussed the DK Basu case also. So that is what is Article 22. Next one, in India, right to free education. Which article provides for free education?
21A.
21A. By which amendment it was inserted?
86th.
Yeah, it was 86th amendment of which year?
2002.
Yeah, it was 86th amendment of 2002 that inserted this particular right. And also one like duty was also inserted on parents to send their kids to school. So this was all about like part 3. If you have any doubts on any article or you want any cases to be discussed or anything, you can let me know regarding part 3.
Okay.
So fine, then next class we will start with DPSPs. In case if you have anything from like part 3, you can let me know, okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.